Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining me. Welcome to today's edition of the Daf Yomi, Daf 47, Amud B, Menachot. Let's dive straight in. So it says, as we learn in Mishnah Me'ilah 6b, in the case of sacrificial portions of offerings of lesser sanctity. So what does that mean? Sacrificial portions of offerings of lesser sanctity, etc. Amui kadoshim kalim v'cholu. In a case of sacrificial portions of offerings of lesser sanctity that were removed from the temple courtyard before the offering's blood was sprinkled, and blood was sprinkled while they were still outside the courtyard, the offering is not disqualified. If the portions are brought back in, the Rambam holds that they are burned on the altar. The Ravid holds that they are not burned on the altar. Even if these portions remain outside the courtyard, the prohibition of pickle nota and of partaking in sacrificial meat while one is ritually impure apply to them. This is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Kiva, interpreted in Rav Papa, and that's in the Rambam Sefer Vod Hilchah Pesudei Makdoshin 133, and see the Ketzer Mishnah and Lechem Mishnah there. What's the background to this? Kadoshim Kolim, offerings of lesser sanctity. In this category, there are various types of individual peace offerings: the thanks of giving offering, the Nazarite's ram, the male firstborn of a kosher animal, an animal tithe, and the paschal offering. These offerings may be slaughtered anywhere in the temple courtyard, with the exception of the thanks offering, the Nazarite's ram, and the paschal offering. They may be eaten during a period of 2 days and the intervening night from the time they were sacrificed. They may be eaten by the people bringing the offering and are any richly pure circumcised individual whom they invite, except for the firstborn offering, which may be eaten only by the priest and the wives, children, and slaves. There is no need to consume them within the temple, but they must be eaten within the walls of Jerusalem. The prohibition against misuse of consecrated property applies only to those portions of offerings consumed on the altar, and only after the blood has been sprinkled on the altar that left the temple courtyard before sprinkling of the blood. Rabbi Eliezer says the sprinkling of the blood is completely ineffective with regard to these portions, and therefore one is not liable for misusing them. And if one eats them, he is not liable due to prohibition of pickle nota. What's nota? The first deposit offering left over after the time it's permitted to be eaten. One who eats nota is liable to receive curry. The sages decreed that the leftover portion be considered ritually impure, so that the priest would be prompt and meticulous in its removal, or partake in sacrificial meat while one is ritually impure. Now, Rabbi Kiva says sprinkling is effective and therefore one is liable for misusing them. And if one eats them, he is liable due to prohibitions of pickle nota of partaking of sacrificial meat while one is ritually impure. The Gemara now concluded the dilemma of Rabbi Shmuel Rav Yitzchak Veid before Rabbi Chia Ba'aba. According to the opinion of Rabbi Kiva, what is the halacha with regard to eating the loaves when the sheep were slaughtered for their own sake, but the blood was sprinkled not for their sake? What clarifies the two sides of the dilemma? One should say that from the fact that sprinkling the blood of the sheep in a manner that renders it pickle, what does that mean? Surikas pickle. If an offering of lesser sanctity was rendered pickle, sacrificial portions are not subject to prohibition against misuse of consecrated property, even though the blood was sprinkled. This is in accordance with the opinion of Rav Gidol in the name of Rav, and that's in the Rambam Sefer Avodah Hilchot Me'ilah 3.3. Renders the loaves pickle, like the meat of the offering, by the fact that the loaves are disqualified by leaving the courtyard of the temple. It can be derived that sprinkling the blood not for its own sake also permits the loaves to be eaten, just as it permits the meat of the sheep to be eaten. Or perhaps it is only to be stringent that we say that the sprinkling the blood is effective with regard to loaves that have left the temple courtyard. We did not say this in order to be lenient, e.g. to render the loaves permitted to be eaten. Rav Papa objects this understanding of the dispute between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Eliezer. From where do we know that they disagree in a case where the loaves are outside the courtyard at the time of the sprinkling? Perhaps in a case where the loaves are still outside the courtyard, everyone agrees that sprinkling the blood is not effective with regard to offerings that left the temple courtyard, and they disagree in a case where the loaves left the courtyard and one brought them back into the courtyard before the sprinkling. Rabbi Eliezer holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Huda Nasi, who said the slaughter of the sheep consecrates the loaves, and therefore the loaves became disqualified by leaving the courtyard after the sheep was slaughtered. Consequently, if they were brought back into the courtyard before the sprinkling of the blood, they cannot become pickle, because they've already been disqualified for a different reason. And Rabbi Kiva holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Shimon said the slaughter of the sheep does not consecrate the loaves at all, before the sprinkling of the blood. Since the loaves are not yet consecrated, they do not become disqualified by leaving the temple courtyard. So the footnote. Consequently, if they are brought back into the courtyard and the priest sprinkles the blood of the sheep with the intent that the offering will be consumed beyond the proper time, even the loaves become pickled. Now that even Rabbi Akiva would agree that an improper sprinkling is not effective with regard to the loaves. E.g., the blood of the sheep is sprinkled while the loaves are outside the courtyard, they do not become pickled. Similarly, if the blood is sprinkled for the sake of a different offering, although the meat of the sheep is permitted to be eaten, the loaves are not permitted to be eaten. The Gemara asks, what is this interpretation of the dispute between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar? It does not fit what they say. Granted, if you say Rabbi Akiva holds in contrary to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, as you said, the slaughter of the sheep consecrates the loaves. That is what Rabbi Akiva means when he says that the loaves are consecrated by the slaughter of the sheep, and then the sprinkling that was done with the intent to consume the offering after its appointed time comes and renders the loaves pickled. But if you say Rabbi Akiva holds in contrary to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Shimon, who said the slaughter of the sheep does not consecrate the loaves without the sprinkling of the blood, the sprinkling with an intent that renders the sheep pickled actually consecrate the loaves. But doesn't Rav Gidel say that Rav says sprinkling with the intent that renders an offering pickled does not cause items to become subject to the prohibition against misuse of consecrated property, and it does not remove items from being subject to the prohibition against misuse of consecrated property? Rav explains that it does not cause items to become subject to the prohibition against misuse of consecrated property applies with regard to sacrificial portions of offerings of lesser sanctity. The prohibition against misusing consecrated property applies to the sacred items of the law, Leviticus 5:15. And accordingly, it does not apply to offerings of lesser sanctity, as the meat is the property of those who brought the offering, and the sacrificial portions are disqualified by the sprinkling performed with improper intent. And the halacha that it does not remove items from being subject to the prohibition against misuse of consecrated property applies with regard to meat of offerings of the most sacred order, such as a sin offering, a guilt offering, or a communal peace offering. Since sprinkling of the blood was not valid, the meat which would have become permitted for the priest to eat retained the status of the sacred items of the Lord, and the prohibition against misuse of consecrated property still applies. The Gemara rejects this explanation. Wasn't that which Rav Gidel says that Rav says conclusively refuted? Lav itosav the Rav Gidel Amar Rav. The Gemara does not explain the basis for his opinion being rejected. The Gemara in Me'ilah 3b adds that Rav Papa asked Abaye concerning this halacha based on the Mishnah Menachot 78b that states that if one slaughters a thanks offering with the intent to eat the meat or to sacrifice his portions outside of his designated temple place, those are nevertheless consecrated to the extent that they are subject to prohibition against misuse. Since the thanks offering is an offering of lesser sanctity, this context allows the assertion that sprinkling with tenant pickle does not subject such offerings to the prohibition against misuse. The Gemara there records that Abaye was unable to defend our statement against this question. Consequently, one cannot ask a question based on this statement. The Gemara cites another dilemma concerning the sheep and the loaves of Shavuot. Rabbi Yirmiyah raised a dilemma before Rabbi Zera in a case of two sheep of Shavuot that one slaughtered for their own sake, and by establishing a bond between the sheep and the loaves were then lost. In a case where the two sheep of Shavuot were slaughtered for their own sake, and then the accompanying loaves were lost, if the blood was sprinkled for his own sake, the sheep are disqualified. If the blood was sprinkled with the intent to eat meat after the designated time, then there is an uncertainty as to whether or not the meat has been rendered permitted to be eaten. As the Rambam Sefer Red Hilchot Pesulech Mudoshin 1920 and see Mahari Koch and the case of Mishnah there. If the blood of the sheep would be sprinkled for their sake, the meat would not be permitted to be eaten because the loaves were lost. That said, what halacha with regard to whether the priest may sprinkle their blood not for their own sake, but rather for the sake of a peace offering, in order to permit the meat of the sheep to be eaten. Rabbi Zera said to Rabbi Yirmiyah, do you have anything that is not fit if the sacrificial rites are performed for its own sake, and yet it is fit if the sacrificial rites are performed not for its own sake? This is certainly not a logical option. Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, and there is no precedent for this, but there is a Paschal offering before midday. Pesach and Mechatzos. If the paschal offering was slaughtered for the sake of a different offering or a non-sacred animal, it is disqualified. This halacha only when it is slaughtered on the 14th of Nisan, even if it was slaughtered in the morning, before the paschal offering is allowed to be slaughtered. If it was slaughtered on a different day, a different offering is valid. This is in accordance with the mission of Zevachim 2a and the opinion of Ben Beteva, cited in Zevachim 11b, Sefer Avodi Hilchot Mitzvot Hamidoshan 15:11. Which is not fit if it is slaughtered for its own sake, as it is before the proper time for the paschal offering, and yet it is fit if it is slaughtered not for its own sake, but rather for the sake of a peace offering. Rabbi Zera replied, this is what I was saying. Do you have anything that was fit to be sacrificed for its own sake, like the sheep on Shavuot that was slaughtered before the loaves were lost, and was then rejected from being sacrificed for its own sake, like those sheep when the loaves were lost, and is it not fit if it is sacrificed for its own sake, and yet it is fit if it is sacrificed not for its own sake? Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, and there is no precedent for this, and there is no precedent for this, but there is a paschal offering which was fit to be sacrificed for its own sake during its designated time, and after the designated time, during the rest of the days of the year before midday. B'shah Yom Hashana Kodem Chatzos. The standard version of the text includes the words before midday at the end of this sentence. It is not clear what this clause would mean in context, as there is no difference whether one sacrifices the animal before or after midday. It is not fit to be sacrificed as a paschal offering, but it is fit to be sacrificed as a peace offering. Rabbi Zera replied, this is what I was saying. Do you have anything that was fit to be sacrificed for its own sake, like the 2 sheep of Shavuot that were slaughtered before the loaves were lost, and it was slaughtered for its own sake, and was then rejected from being sacrificed for its own sake, like the 2 sheep when the loaves were lost, and this is not fit if it is sacrificed for its own sake, and yet it is fit if it is sacrificed not for its own sake. Rabbi Yirmiyah responded, and there's no precedent for this, but there is the thanks offering, as the Gemara in 46a states that if the thanks offering was slaughtered, and then its accompanying loaves broke into pieces and thereby became disqualified, the blood should be sprinkled for the sake of a peace offering rather than a thanks offering, and then the meat may be eaten. Yet, if the blood was sprinkled for the sake of a thanks offering, the meat would not be permitted to be eaten. Rabbi Zera answered, the thanks offering is different, as the rest one called it a peace offering, Leviticus 7:13. Just as a peace offering is sacrificed without loaves, so too a thanks offering may sometimes be sacrificed without loaves. Therefore, the loss of the loaves do not render the thanks offering disqualified, and this case is not comparable to the case of the 2 sheep and the 2 loaves of Shavuot. The Gemara cites another discussion concerning the sheep and the loaves of Shavuot. Sages talking about if one slaughtered 2 sheep as required, but they were accompanied by 4 loaves, on the requisite 2 loaves, he draws 2 of the loaves from the 4 and waves them together with the sheep. The rest of the loaves are permitted to be eaten through redemption. So what's the footnote there? Shachat shenei kivasim al arba chalos. In a case where one slaughtered the 2 sheep, but they were accompanied by 4 loaves, if he stipulates that 2 of them should be consecrated, he should wave 2 of the loaves together with the offering. He should then redeem the other 2 in the temple courtyard, after which they may be brought out of the temple courtyard and eaten as non-sacred food. If he did not stipulate that only 2 of them should be consecrated, then none of the loaves are consecrated. This is the opinion of the Braita and the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan from Sefer Avodi Hilchot Tamidim Misafim 11:8. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you a very good day. All the best. Bye.